Hello all, welcome to the solo cast of Firecode Tech. In these episodes, it's just going to be me, your host, Gus Gagliardi. There's going to be a range of topics, but I'm going to talk about specific technologies, installation standards, codes and how they work, as well as some other interesting topics that don't neatly fit inside of the context of a normal interview. Hello all, welcome to another episode of Firecode Tech. This solocast is going to be a little different. I'm going to be playing my interview from last week's Industry Affairs Summit with Aaron Johnson. We get into a little bit about my backstory and some interesting information on how to start a podcast. Really had fun being a part of the summit and was honored to be on a lineup with people who are huge in the industry like Joe Meyer and Chris Campbell and Drew Slocum and some of the other content creators in the space. If you want to check out some more about the summit and listen to these other interviews, I'll drop a link below. I think you got to pay for it now, but it's still available if you want to pay the premium. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us on social media. Oh, and give us a 5-star review on Apple iTunes podcasts if you would be so kind.
Welcome to the Fire Protection Industry Affairs Virtual Summit. Today I'm here with Gus. Gus, thanks for coming and being part. Why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us who you are, where you started, how you got to where you are today, and where you're going or what's next.
Yeah, so my name is Gus Gagliardi. I'm a registered professional engineer. I work in the construction industry. I do design engineering for a variety of existing and new construction facilities. Started off with a degree in fire protection and safety technology from Oklahoma State. Moved on and had a fire suppression role right out of college. And really learned about the nuts and bolts of how to put sprinkler systems together. Spent the last 5 years almost of my career at FSB, a pretty large full-service A&E firm in Oklahoma City, the largest, I think, Oklahoma City owned firm. So yeah, a lot of hangar work, a lot of Department of Defense work, high industrial facilities. And then, now I just started a new role as a fire protection engineer at Rated Engineering, and I'm going to be doing a lot of similar work with the hangars and the DoD work, but also looking to incorporate the full scope of what a fire protection engineer can do as far as work and consulting services. So yeah, that's a little bit about my elevator pitch. Oh, and I didn't mention that, excuse me, sorry. I am the host of Industry First podcast, Firecode Tech, where we discuss everything fire protection, and we just basically interview professionals, and we also have solocast episodes where I do deep dives into topics like codes and standards, specific technologies, and just a variety of fire and life safety topics. So yeah, that's a bit about my career and background and my elevator pitch, Aaron. Thanks for having me.
Awesome, man. Thanks for being here. So that sounds, starting a new thing is always exciting. So I'm glad for you. I'm sure you have some mixed emotions about that.
Oh yeah, it's been such a blessing. My last 5 years at FSB was so awesome. Like being a part of a firm that's full service. So I got to, work with structural engineers, electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, architects, interior designers. And so it's been great cutting my teeth with projects and getting to collaborate in-house with a variety of design professionals and just learned so much in the last 5 years. So it's been tough saying goodbye these last couple weeks, but super excited for the new gig and the chance to lean into fire protection some more and really discover everything that a FPE can do. So excited. Yeah, mixed bittersweet though. You're right.
Awesome. Yep. No, I've been there. Now, will you have to move or can you stay where you're at and still do the job?
No. So my last commute was 18 miles and this next commute is only 4 miles. So, super stoked to get such a good opportunity, and it's, like 10 minutes away from my house. So with all the lights red. So it's a good deal. I'm stoked on it. So yeah, Perfect. Super excited.
Awesome. Well, let's get into some other stuff. Thanks for sharing all that. And I'm happy for you and looking forward to the new things that you're going to be doing. So we're going to come back to your podcast a little bit later because I want to really dig a little bit deeper into that, into those processes and what you do. But first of all, tell us about some associations or groups that you're involved in and what kind of value that you gain from being involved in those groups.
Actually, I found this most recent job opportunity was through professional organizations. I'm part of SFPE. I've been I'm a member of NFPA and, National Fire Protection Association, Society of Fire Protection Engineers. I love professional societies. There's so much benefit to be gained from them. Business is all about personal connections and business connections and genuine connections. And so a great way to develop those connections and maintain that knowledge base that you need as a professional is to be involved in professional societies. That's kind of a core tenet of what we talk about on the podcast is like how to stay professionally relevant, and professional societies are a great way to do that. Most societies bring in professional leaders to speak about different topics and things to keep you relevant in what's going on in the industry. And so there's so much to be gained, networking and having the opportunity to build a web of professionals that you can lean on if you have problems in the industry. That's invaluable. I mean, the ability to say, hey, individual that I met who's a fire suppression contractor, a fire alarm contractor. I'm not knowledgeable on VESDA. Can you help me out in like some of the design practices for this system or, kind of rough order of magnitude pricing for this system? And so, you really, as a professional, to have all the tools that you need for your toolkit, you, in my opinion, have to be involved in professional societies, because if you don't, you're limiting yourself in your options for how to solve problems. And as a professional, you get paid to solve problems. So that's probably a couple of the biggest advantages I see in being involved in professional societies. I named SFPE, NFPA, AFSA, American Fire Sprinkler Association, NFSA, National Fire Sprinkler Association, AFAA, American Fire Alarm Association. Those are probably some of the biggest ones that throw out free webinars and have a lot of relevant system information for my field, but they get super niche. You could go all the way down to specific occupancies. Like there's a whole bunch of hangar specific ones, as I'm sure MRO facilities. Sorry, I got a frog in my throat.
No problem.
But yeah.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks for sharing. That's a lot. That I know that alphabet soup can go on and on forever.
Yeah.
So, no, thank you for sharing that and sharing those associations, what they are and kind of what you gain from them. So let's go back a little bit and talk about, kind of focus more on the podcast and on that podcasting process. Yeah. So you said you host and started this podcast. So why did you do that? Why did you want to do that? What kind of gap in the industry do you think that it filled? What were your motivations for starting that, and kind of what were the steps you took to get that started?
Yeah. So I don't think it filled the gap in the industry, but as a professional, a couple years out of, about maybe 1 or 2 years into my time at FSB, so maybe like 2 or 3 years into being a professional, I was like, well, I want to know more. And there's only so many resources that a company can give you while they need to maintain production of what product they are selling. And so as somebody who is somebody who wants to learn and somebody who wants to keep a competitive edge, I just thought, how do I connect with people? How do I, connect these dots? And so for me, I'm an avid podcast listener. And so I took what I knew, which was fire protection engineering and podcasting. And in the confluence of that area, I thought, well, maybe I can leverage this to learn more and provide a resource to people like me, who want to know more about the industry, but maybe don't have the facilities to, find this information out. How many times does a 2-year or 3-year professional get to reach out to people on NFPA codes and standards and talk to them about the codes and standards process and, how that works and technical related information to those codes and standards? I mean, it has given me a seat at the table in which I would have never had, if I would not have started the podcast, and really I think has accelerated my learning process. Like I'd say at least 2 or 3 years for just my ability to find out information about topics. So I think that was a big reason why I started it, and the gap that it started to fill in the industry, I still think there's a huge gap to fill. I hope that more people get into it. I hope that we can continue to foster this network of professionals who are looking to put out a variety of content around fire and life safety. I'm not somebody who thinks that there is a finite amount of, content or consumption for good fire and life safety information. I think the more the merrier, and I hope more people get into it. But, as far as steps to get there, I would tell people that if you have interest in doing something, a blog or a podcast or YouTube videos, I'd say just figure it out. Just go do it, because there is no huge financial or technical barrier to go do these things. Really, the only barrier to entry is your own volition and time to go do these things. If you have those two things, I think you could get by with a really cheap mic and a cheap computer, and you could probably put something out there that somebody would find interesting and reach out and tell you, hey man, I think this is awesome. And if you did it for a couple of years, you probably find out that you're starting to get good at it. So awesome, that's my piece of advice on that.
No, thanks for sharing. I like that, you talk about it gave you a seat at the table, and I kind of had the same experience when I started blogging I guess it's been about 17 years ago now, or 15 years ago. Started doing just, regular blogs. Blogs were kind of new back then. And so, but I found the same thing, right? It got you a seat at the table. When you're sharing those articles and comment, I got to interact with people from all over the world instead of just my little community. So awesome.
Definitely.
Thanks.
Yeah. It widens your scope of influence, or your, ability to network, and, like we talked about before, connections and ability to problem solve. And, you talking to me about reaching out to people and getting information for articles. That's so powerful. I mean, like, to give you that avenue to do that.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. So thank you. So, how does this the side project, this kind of hobby project, how does it impact your day job, and what practical or personal professional benefits have you realized from it?
I would say that on a day-to-day basis, it's pretty minimal on how it impacts my day job. I mean, I'll send out a couple emails a week to invite guests. I spend the time on the weekends editing podcasts, maybe like anywhere from 2 to 4 hours producing, social media copy, show notes, and, mixing and editing podcasts. So functionally, that's what it looks like as far as time impact. Of course, there was startup energy involved that we're not talking about. This is me in steady state after I've been doing it for coming up on 2 years in April. What has it given me? In my career, it's given me so much. I don't think that I would have this job opportunity that I do now without the knowledge base and like the competitive edge that I've gained from, fostering connections and becoming a professional who has just leaned into, networking and trying to be more competitive. I don't think that I would have the same opportunities. I don't think that I would have, I don't think I would be the professional that I am today without the podcast. So, that's kind of a broad statement, but I truly believe that. And, cause you get to a point in your career where, you're at a company, you may be in a set track of what this experience can bring you. And so how do you differentiate? Do you get certifications? Do you, take on a new important, valuable skill set? How do you make yourself a more competitive professional? So for me, it's, along with my technical expertise and willing to learn about, things in the industry that are difficult and valuable, I think that it has given me a huge advantage, over my peers. But that's just my 2 cents. I'm sure I'm inflated about that idea.
No, it's true. Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing. So, you do have a lot of great guests on the podcast, and I know we've kind of talked in the past on, how do you get these great guests to come onto your podcast? 'Cause I'm sure you probably get more no's than yeses, or get just ignored emails. But how do you get the guests that you do have? How do you get them to come onto your podcast, and how do you find these 2 or 3 people that you email every week?
I think that it's easier than you think. It's easier than you think, and I'd say my hit ratio is probably closer to like 50 or 60% than like 40 or 30%.
Okay.
You'd be surprised. So people are professionals and they are in fire and life safety their whole lives. And they have fascinating jobs. I've traveled all across the country. I've been in aircraft hangars that were built in World War II. I have, worked in probably more than a dozen states, probably closer to 20 states across the U.S. You think I don't want to talk about that? You think that I don't love what I do and I'm not passionate about that? You think other people in the industry who have these great careers and experiences don't want to tell people and give people a leg up for their professional careers? No. You look for the passion, I would say, in finding guests. People who are passionate about what they do and their involvement in professional societies. Those are the people who are interested. After a while, you kind of get a sense for who would be interested in this sort of thing. And once you can sniff that out, it's a lot easier to find guests. So, I think that there's so many incredible stories, in probably a lot of industries, but especially in fire and life safety. And so, that process really just looks like a lot of LinkedIn searches or being knowledgeable about industry related topics or fields and searching through, oh, I read a good magazine article. Oh, who's the author on this magazine article? Oh, this guy says that he works at the Smithsonian. Oh, this sounds like a good episode. And so, I reach out to Michael Kilby, and he's gracious enough to come on the podcast, and he sits on 2 NFPA boards or, committees, and one for historical and cultural museums, and another one that I've never heard of. And he's willing to come talk to me about how to protect extremely valuable assets. And so, I think it's easier than it sounds. And that's some of that barrier to entry, is like how difficult you think it's going to be.
Good. Yeah, that would be the fear probably that people have in getting started. So thanks for kind of alleviating that for some of us. So,
yeah.
I've been on your show a few times, and I've talked to some other people that I've been. And so the thing that we all have in common when we talk about Gus's podcast is that Gus is the easiest guy to talk to when we do these shows. So what do you think it is about you or your style that makes you so easy to talk to?
Man, I love people, and I've always been interested in personal stories. If you don't like people and you don't like talking to people, then podcasting is probably not for you. But for me, I have no trouble talking, and I have no trouble being interested in people and really caring about what's going on in their life and personally what moves them. I've listened to all kinds of podcasts, and I was learning how to code, so I would listen to this podcast called, I think it was Learn to Code with Me or something, and basically it was all framed around personal life stories and how people have overcome adversity, and I always found that so compelling. So, I've taken little bits and pieces of podcasting style and personal interaction that I've found really touching and compelling, and I try to embody those in the podcast that I have. So I think part of it is genuinely I'm interested in this stuff. If you're not interested, it comes across in the podcast. It's going to come off flat. It's going to be weak, and people can sense that. And it takes about 3 seconds for people to sniff, people being not genuine and tune out and log off. And so, cause there's a billion different things for content you can get these days. So you have to be invested in what you're doing. You have to care. You have to want to talk, or else it's not going to work.
Right. Good. So you mentioned some you're an avid podcast listener.
Yeah.
What are some podcasts that you listen to?
So I guess I could break it down into like, a number of categories, because, I vacillate between, do I want something interesting? You know, you want to do something like Stuff You Should Know? Do you want to laugh? Do you want something like Two Bears, One Cave? It's just, you know, irreverent comedy and kind of ridiculousness. Do you have a personal hobby or project you want to get into? You know, is there something about cooking you want to know about? You know, I used to listen to, used to be a great podcast. It's changed host now, but it was like about, people who work for like, I think Bon Appetit, no, not Bon Appetit, but, some other food magazine in New York. I can't remember, but they would just go over like people's cookbooks and things. So, I mean, I listen to everything you could think of, and, you know, I'll go through periods where I'm listening to only podcasts, and like, you know, I'll burn through like 6 to 10 of these a week easy. And then I'll switch to something like audiobooks, or I'll switch to something like all music, or so. I think that's why I knew that it was going to work. Fire Code Tech was going to work, is because I know how I consume podcasts. And I was like, I don't just like one podcast. I like 20 podcasts. And if it's good, I don't care how many podcasts there are. I'm going to find time to lean into that content. So, yeah, that's a little bit of my background on podcasts. It's always hard to answer that because I'm always vacillating between, I like the new stuff as much as I like the well-established stuff. There's something fun about being involved when a podcast just starts and you feel like you're a part of something a little bit. It's fun to have that like sense of community that people have, even though you really don't know the person at all.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. My thing with the new startups is you get really attached to the show, then they stop after like 5 episodes and they just disappear, you know?
Oh, so. Yeah. The number one thing with any content is be consistent. That's one of the hugest benefits that people get out of podcasts. I know every Monday that X podcast comes out, and that gives me comfort and that gives me enjoyment, and I get a sense of relief as I drive to work on Monday because I get to listen to X podcast. If you can't provide that, then nobody's going to stick around to hear what you got to say. So first and foremost, be consistent. Otherwise, you can just forget about it. You know, don't even start if you don't want to be consistent, because, I've seen most podcasts burn out, and it makes me sad, honestly, because some people have great potential.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Your podcast listening time to be cut down though with your new job, your short commute time now.
I thought about that. You can't even really get into a podcast in 10 minutes.
I know.
I was thinking I got to switch to music now because you got to get like some sort of pump up, but you can't like really settle into an hour-long podcast in 10 minutes.
That's right. That's right.
I had that thought for sure this week. I was like, man, this cuts into like me, like really getting into a state of mind going to work.
You have to get up early. You have to get up at the same time just to get your podcast listening in before you leave.
I know.
So tell us a little bit about the practical steps that you actually take. Like, what's the whole process from inviting the guest to preparing to actually posting the podcast? And then do you do everything, or do you outsource some of it to other companies or people?
No, I do everything. I think eventually I will look at kicking some of the podcast editing out. But honestly, like, for the price of what you get for editing, like, it can be anywhere from low cost would be for audio only. Video is a lot more expensive, but, the price points for per episode, like, I think I calculated, I forget what the number was. I calculated how much money on average I spend, and it's like a couple dollars per podcast episode if you cut it down to all of the hosting fees and like everything that I've signed up for, whatever email account. And like if you roll all that into one number and divide it by 365, it's like a couple dollars. But that's because I do all of the editing and all of the media stuff and all of the show notes and everything. So functionally what that looks like, I'll send an email out and ask them to gauge their interests. Then I will try to establish the date and or schedule time. After there's a schedule time, I will develop a set of questions, and usually it's easiest for me to think about those questions in categories. So I'll kind of broadly think of some categories. For fire code tech, generally it's people's story, like a technical competency issue or topic, and then professional development. So if you think about it in those categories, I generally know that it only takes about, depending on the person, anywhere from 10 to 15 questions to fill an hour. But that's highly dependent on the person's level of skill and level of passion and level of ease in speaking to fill that hour. So I've had people where I've gotten through maybe like less than 4 questions, and then I've had people where I've just like it's pulling teeth and I got to have like 17 questions to get through an hour. So it's highly variable on the person. And so we'll record the episode, and then I will mix and master the audio and compile that and upload it to a hosting website, which distributes it to Spotify, Apple, Google Play, like 8 different places, and distributes it all in one place. So yeah, that's a little bit about the workflow. And then it releases every Monday. It releases really early in the morning. I don't know why I started that, but it releases at like 2 a.m. on Mondays. But I figured people could have it whenever they start their commute. So I'm consistent, and I think that's important. But that's a bit about the process.
Awesome. So it also looks like, since we're on video, it looks like you're in like your own sound booth. So tell me a little bit about like what you got going on there, the equipment.
Oh yeah, I just rigged this up. I am in the process of like getting everything incorporated for video. My brother has a video podcast, so he kind of like charged the path on letting me know like everything you need for video. And like really, if you have a nice camera, which I don't, I'm just using a computer camera, but like you can set up a certain focus and depth of field, but I'd say the elements are lighting, sound quality. So you set up sound blankets around a room to really dampen the noise and give it that studio-esque sound. And then, you have lighting, and there's great posts online about how to set up the 3 different components of lighting, or like the 3-point lighting it's called. So there's like basically, just like a backlight, a key light, and like I don't know the terminology, but so I've tried to incorporate that a little bit for this, but honestly I just threw up all this stuff this morning. But yeah, I'd say focus on the sound quality, the lighting, and the aesthetic. Like if I had some knickknacks or something in the background, I think that'd be a lot better, but I don't. I just threw up a sound blanket to give a nice backdrop and have some lighting so the face isn't washed out.
That's right. Awesome, man. So, and you've given a lot of tools, and I really appreciate that. But to the audience today, what's one actionable step that they can go to do today? And if they say, I want to start a podcast, what's the one thing they can go and do right now to get started in that direction?
You need to go record a podcast today if you want to do a podcast. Don't wait until you're ready. Don't wait until you get the sign from wherever you want to get the sign. If you want to do a podcast, schedule a podcast today. Get your buddy, whoever it is, tell them we're doing a podcast. We don't have to release it, but we're going to do it, and I'm going to practice my skills interviewing or having a conversation or whatever scheme you want for your podcast. Go do it today, because if you can find a reason not to do it, you're going to keep finding a reason not to do it. And that is like the other huge hurdle after you've convinced yourself to do one is to convince yourself to post one. And then after you've posted one, make sure you put yourself in a position to post at the same frequency you've set out. So I recorded like 4 or 6 podcasts before I released any, because I had no clue how hard it was going to be to keep a churning backlog of professionals and videos recorded. I don't know if that was necessary. It's what made me feel comfortable at the time. But yeah, I'd say if you are interested in doing a podcast, grab whatever microphone and or camera you have today and go record one, because the first one you're going to do is going to be hard, and then they'll get easier after that. But if you don't actually start recording podcasts, you're not a podcaster. So just go do it. Go do it, because I guarantee you it's easier than what you think it's going to be. And there's a billion articles online on how to figure it out. So if you really want it, you can do it.
Awesome. So I know we're going to change gears a little bit as we start to kind of wrap things up. You're a fire protection engineer. You're in that field. So what would you say is the current state of the industry for the fire protection engineering field or the aspiring fire protection engineer?
I'd say I have not in my career experienced a better time to become a fire protection engineer. The industry is absolutely white hot for career opportunity and a chance to professionally develop and get a good job and have a competitive salary for a good job. So I think that if you have any interest in fire and life safety and you want to make your foray into the field, say do it now, because the industry is on a bull run. The market's white hot with opportunity. I've never seen it be this good in the last six years of being in business. So the industry, even despite all of the supply chain disruptions and all of these inherent difficulties with COVID, the industry is just chugging away full speed. And I don't know how long that's going to last, but right now it's incredible to see the amount of construction that's going on right now and the construction that I've seen that's been scheduled for the next couple of years. So that is what I see happening right now. Some big topics I see in the industry are batteries, lithium-ion batteries being a big one. What else? Heavy timber construction for like sustainability and kind of environmental impact. That's a huge thing I see right now in the industry, a push on the national scale. I think a big part of thing that I want to be an advocate for is bringing people into the industry, because another trend that I see on the macro level is a lack in people coming into the field. I see the program that I came from, Oklahoma State, produces about anywhere from 40 to 50 candidates a year. And that doesn't even scratch the surface of what the industry needs for just FPEs. Like that doesn't even start to really move the needle for what we're going to need for people getting into fire alarm, fire sprinkler, fire protection engineering. I mean, there's so many jobs, and people from my program go into, safety and a lot of other different avenues. So they might go work for a petroleum company, or they might go, work safety for, industrial, a company like International Paper or something like that. Yeah. So maybe only a quarter to a third of those kids are becoming, in the system side of fire and life safety. So it's a huge boom time, and it's a super consistent job market. So, I would say please get involved. There's so much promise and opportunity right now for anybody with competency, and it's not too hard to be competent.
Awesome. Thank you. So we're wrapping up here. Before we do, is there anything else that you'd like to share or something that you'd like to discuss that we haven't mentioned yet? Feel free to do that now, and then just kind of tell us where can people find you?
Yeah, I think that, no, as far as topics left, I think we've covered a lot of good stuff. Just to put a big plug in for the podcast here, Fire Code Tech, you can find it wherever you find podcasts. Like we said before, Spotify, YouTube, Apple, Google Play, all the above. Go find it. There's great topics about, whether you like aircraft hangars or fire alarm or fire suppression, or you want some tips and tricks on how to pass your FE or PE. There's great information on these podcasts where I get to interview professionals like Aaron and people who are absolute leaders in the industry with 30 and 40 years of experience, just giving out great secrets, and not secrets, but just tips and tricks for people to be competitive in the industry. Also, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm Gus Gagliardi, and on Twitter at GagsGus. What's GAGZGUS? So, I think that I've enjoyed the podcast. Aaron, thank you so much for having me, and would love to do it again. I hope there's another one of these. I hope this becomes an annual gig.
Awesome, man. No, thank you for your words and thank you for sharing and taking your time. So we appreciate it. Thanks a lot, man.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Be sure to share the episode with a friend if you enjoyed it. Don't forget that fire protection and life safety is serious business. The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are by no means a professional consultation or a codes and standards interpretation. Be sure to contact a licensed professional if you are getting involved with fire protection and or life safety. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.